In late September 2011, 41-year-old Yvonne Baldelli arrived in the tropical haven of Bocas del Toro, Panama. In late September 2011, 41-year-old Yvonne Baldelli arrived in the tropical haven of Bocas del Toro, Panama, alongside her boyfriend, 35-year-old Brian Brimager, a former U.S. Marine. To the world, it looked like the start of a beautiful new chapter, a fresh beginning in a place where turquoise waters brushed against white sand and the rhythm of island life promised freedom, peace, and adventure. Yvonne had left behind the stresses of her old life in California, dreaming of turning the page and rebuilding her future. Brian, too, seemed ready to start over, carrying with him the charm and confidence that had first drawn Yvonne in. Together, they imagined days filled with sunlight, laughter, and the serenity of island living. But paradise can be an illusion. Beneath the palm trees and postcard-perfect scenery, something darker was already taking shape. Hidden tensions, buried lies, and unspoken fears began to surface, cracks forming beneath the calm exterior of their relationship. What began as a journey of hope would soon unravel into a story of deception, violence, and heartbreak, a nightmare that would shatter lives and leave a community in shock. For years, Yvonne had shared her life through emails with her sister Michelle. No matter where she went, their connection never wavered, even when Yvonne packed up her life and moved to Panama. She sent daily photos, little notes about her adventures, and updates about her new life abroad. But then, suddenly, the messages stopped. Michelle knew something wasn't right. Their bond was too strong for her sister to simply vanish from contact. At first, she tried to stay calm, convincing herself that maybe Yvonne was somewhere remote with bad internet, or perhaps just caught up in the excitement of travel with her boyfriend, Brian. But as days turned into weeks, worry turned into dread. Then came the call from Brian. He told Michelle he had returned to the United States alone and wanted to pick up his car, which was still parked at her home. According to him, he and Yvonne had broken up, and she had supposedly run off to Costa Rica with another man. Brian claimed that Yvonne ended their relationship after discovering he had a child with someone else. Michelle didn't believe it. Her sister would have told her. Yvonne wasn't the kind of woman to disappear without a word, especially after heartbreak. And the idea that she would move to another country with a stranger felt completely out of character. If anything, Michelle thought, Yvonne would have come home to California to recover. She had truly loved Brian. She had even imagined a future with him. Just months earlier, in September 2011, Yvonne and Brian had been full of excitement as they prepared for their move to Panama. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a journey through Central America with plans to settle for a while in Panama, soaking up its beauty and rhythm. Both were searching for a new beginning. They had met 2 years earlier, in 2009, in Southern California. Yvonne had recently gone through a divorce and was trying to rebuild her life. Brian, a former Marine, came across as confident and charming. He made her feel safe again. Their relationship developed quickly, and Yvonne believed she had found someone who shared her adventurous spirit. But her family wasn't as sure. Michelle worried that Yvonne was giving too much of herself to a man who didn't seem fully committed. What Yvonne didn't know at the beginning was that Brian was still legally married when they met, though he claimed to be separated. He hid that truth well, presenting himself as an independent man ready to start over. Eventually, he did finalize his divorce, but their relationship had already weathered several breakups and reconciliations. By the time they left for Panama, both were looking for a reset. Yvonne had recently lost her management job at Procter & Gamble, and Brian was hoping for a new purpose after leaving the Marines. Together, they dreamed of starting small, a modest, creative life near the ocean. They rented a simple room in a 5-unit hostel in Bocas del Toro, surrounded by turquoise waters and palm trees. Yvonne brought along 2 sewing machines, planning to launch a small clothing line using local fabrics. Brian spent his evenings playing guitar at nearby bars, earning meals and drinks with his music. And then there was Georgia May, Yvonne's beloved King Charles Spaniel. The little dog had been her loyal companion through all of life's transitions. In Panama, Georgia May became her source of comfort, a piece of home in a new and uncertain place. Locals often saw the pair walking along the beach, the small dog trotting happily at her side. Despite their humble circumstances, Yvonne seemed genuinely happy. Her emails to Michelle painted pictures of a peaceful island life, bright mornings, warm breezes, and laughter. She wrote about her dreams for the future and how much she loved the place she now called paradise. Everything, she said, was going well. Until the day the emails stopped. The family tried to remain logical, but panic began to take hold. They had always trusted Yvonne's judgment, and the idea that she had suddenly run off with a stranger felt completely out of character. Michelle refused to believe Brian's story. She told him that if he wanted to retrieve his car, which was parked at her home, he'd first need to file a missing person report. Brian refused. He insisted Yvonne would contact them soon, asking them to wait. Then, out of nowhere, Michelle received an email from Yvonne's account. "Hi sis, just an update. Brian and I are no longer together. I should have trusted my instincts that he is a lying, cheating ass. I'm headed to Costa Rica with a man I met when we first got to Bocas." Michelle stared at the screen in disbelief. Could it really be true? Could Yvonne have left with someone else? For those who truly knew her, that message didn't make sense. Yvonne had always wanted to become a mother. It was her biggest dream. Learning that Brian had secretly fathered a child would have devastated her, but disappearing without a trace? That wasn't who she was. Michelle's mind raced with questions. Maybe Yvonne was too hurt to talk. Maybe she needed time alone. Still, something about the email felt wrong. The tone, the wording, even the rhythm of her sister's usual writing wasn't there. It read like someone pretending to be her. The family clung to hope, telling themselves Yvonne just needed space. But Christmas came and went, and there was still no sign of her. Yvonne had always been deeply family-oriented. She would never miss the holidays. Then, another email arrived near the end of December. "Miss you and everyone at home. I'm starting to get a little homesick. I'm working on plans to get home as early as the second week of January. I've been living with cliffhangers for a while. Love you, Yvonne." At first, the message offered a sense of relief. It suggested that Yvonne was safe and planning to return soon. Her father, Jim, allowed himself to believe that everything would be fine, that Yvonne would come home in time for the family gathering they had planned for January. Still, something about the emails felt wrong. They lacked Yvonne's warmth and attention to detail. There were no photos, no descriptions of her days, and no mention of her beloved dog, Georgia May. The messages felt distant, almost mechanical, unlike the lively correspondence her family was used to receiving. Not long after, Brian arrived at Michelle's house in California to collect his car. Although she distrusted him, she handed over the keys. In the following days, Michelle tried once more to reach Yvonne by email. She wrote to confirm that her sister was safe, but deep down, she already sensed that something was terribly wrong. Weeks passed, still no sign of Yvonne. By mid-January, the silence was unbearable. Brian continued to refuse any involvement with the police, claiming she'd resurface soon. The family's patience ran out. That's when Yvonne's cousin, a tech-savvy computer expert, stepped in to help. He offered to trace the emails, believing that the IP addresses could reveal where they were actually sent from. He began analyzing the digital trail. The first emails, the ones supposedly sent from Panama, really did come from Panama. But the later messages, the ones allegedly written from Costa Rica, told a different story. They came from the United States, specifically from Dana Point, California, the same town where Brian was living. Michelle couldn't believe what she was seeing. Both Yvonne's Costa Rica emails and Brian's own messages were sent from the exact same IP address. That's when the horrifying truth sank in. Brian had been using Yvonne's email account to send fake messages, trying to convince everyone that she was alive and traveling. Michelle felt her entire world collapse. The realization that her sister was gone was overwhelming, a moment of shock and disbelief that words could barely describe. It was the kind of pain that comes suddenly, like a wave that leaves nothing standing. Yvonne's stepmother, Lillian, felt the same devastating certainty. She no longer believed her stepdaughter was missing. She knew something far worse had happened. For the family, hope gave way to grief. The search for Yvonne was no longer about finding her alive, but about uncovering what Brian had done. For Jim and Lillian Faust, the news was devastating beyond words. They had already endured one tragedy years earlier, the loss of their son to leukemia. And now, more than a decade later, they faced another nightmare. This time, it was their daughter. The fear that had haunted them for weeks had become reality. Yvonne was gone, and the man she loved was at the center of it all. With the discovery that the emails had come from California, the FBI officially stepped in. The case was no longer just a missing person investigation. It was treated as a probable homicide, and Brian became the prime suspect. Investigators quickly checked airport records and confirmed what Yvonne's family had suspected all along. There was no record of her ever leaving Panama. She had never boarded a flight to Costa Rica or anywhere else. The story Brian had told was a lie. Meanwhile, Yvonne's family decided they couldn't wait for answers from afar. They flew to Panama themselves, determined to find her. What followed was an emotional and exhausting search across Bocas del Toro. The family printed flyers, handed out leaflets, and spoke to everyone who might have seen her. They held press conferences, pleading for information, and their desperate search captured the hearts of many Panamanians. Local news stations began covering the case, and volunteers from nearby islands joined the search. Fishermen used their boats to scan the coastline, while others combed through dense jungle, hoping to find any clue that could explain Yvonne's disappearance. As investigators began interviewing locals, a darker picture emerged, one that shattered the image of the happy couple Yvonne had described in her emails. Witnesses who had seen Brian and Yvonne together spoke of frequent arguments. Several recalled that Brian drank heavily and often became aggressive when intoxicated. Others mentioned seeing signs of drug use, and one acquaintance remembered him saying, half-jokingly, that he needed to return to the United States before his nose fell off. Those who had interacted closely with the couple said the relationship had grown toxic. Bartenders who saw Brian perform at local bars remembered Yvonne sitting quietly in the audience, sometimes with visible bruises. One evening, a staff member noticed a dark mark beneath her eye. When asked about it, Yvonne brushed it off, offering a quick, nervous smile. Everyone suspected what she wouldn't say aloud, that Brian had hit her. Even the owners of the small hostel where they were staying admitted they often heard shouting from the couple's room at night. They described hearing objects thrown, followed by Yvonne's muffled cries. One of the owners later told police they had personally seen Brian strike her. While Yvonne's family searched tirelessly under the scorching Panamanian sun, Brian acted as if nothing had happened. Back in the United States, he showed little interest in the investigation. He didn't join any search efforts, didn't call authorities, and seemed entirely detached from Yvonne's fate. When police eventually contacted him, his indifference was striking. He appeared calm, almost too calm, for a man whose girlfriend had supposedly vanished abroad. As the FBI dug deeper, they began uncovering a web of lies stretching far beyond Panama. They learned that Brian had been living a double life. For years he had hidden another woman and a child from Yvonne. His wife, Kristen, was the mother of his daughter, and their relationship had overlapped with his time in Panama. Kristen's background made the situation even more complicated. She had once worked at the White House during President George W. Bush's administration, where she met Brian while he was helping secure contracts for American mining companies. To her, he was a disciplined Marine who had recently left active duty. She believed his November 2011 trip to Panama was just a short getaway, a chance to decompress. She had never even heard of Yvonne Baldelli. It was later confirmed by one of Brian's former Marine friends that Kristen had been completely unaware of Yvonne's existence. Brian had lied to both women, maintaining two separate lives built on deceit. When the FBI questioned Kristen, she appeared strangely detached, offering little emotion. Brian, too, showed no sign of concern. By then he was living comfortably with Kristen and their young daughter near San Diego. To neighbors, he seemed like an ordinary suburban father, golfing in his free time, smiling at the playground, living a peaceful life. When federal agents arrived at his door, Brian invited them in without hesitation. The interview lasted 4 hours. Sitting calmly, he repeated the same story he had told before, that Yvonne had left Bocas del Toro on November 27, 2011, headed for Costa Rica to start over. He said she took all her belongings and that she hadn't told him when she'd be back. He portrayed himself as the concerned ex-boyfriend, a man blindsided by her sudden departure. But behind his calm demeanor, investigators saw something else, a carefully rehearsed lie. The agents already had information that shattered his story. When confronted with evidence that the Yvonne emails were sent from his own IP address in Southern California, not from Panama or Costa Rica, Brian's composure began to crack. He looked startled, but kept denying any involvement. When the FBI searched his condo in Dana Point, one of the agents immediately noticed something familiar: a white laptop resting on the table. Yvonne had owned a laptop exactly like that, supposedly the one she'd taken with her when she ran off. The device was seized and examined. What investigators found inside confirmed their worst suspicions. It was indeed Yvonne's computer. From that laptop, Brian had been impersonating her, sending messages to her family, pretending she was alive, and carefully crafting a digital illusion. But the hard drive revealed far more than deceit. Investigators uncovered photos of Yvonne with visible injuries, bruises under her eye, the same marks witnesses in Panama had described. There were also chilling web searches, one that stood out above all others: how to clean a bloody mattress. The evidence painted a gruesome picture. Brian had not only taken Yvonne's life, he had tried to erase every trace of it. He accessed her bank accounts, withdrawing small sums of cash to keep up the appearance that she was still traveling through Central America. Every move was calculated to maintain the illusion of her freedom while concealing her murder. The FBI was now certain. Yvonne Baldelli had been killed by the man she loved. The motive was as human as it was horrific: rage, betrayal, and fear of exposure. Yvonne had discovered the truth, that Brian had a child and had been living a double life. And she had planned to confront him. It was likely the confrontation that ended her life. Still, for a time, Brian remained a free man. No body meant no proof, but arrogance would be his downfall. After the murder, he had dismembered Yvonne's body with a machete, then, in an act of stunning recklessness, sold the weapon to a man in Panama. His carelessness didn't end there. Online, Brian made a sickening joke about the sale, writing, "I only dismembered one stripper with it. It's hardly used." That offhand comment became the key that unlocked the case. Investigators tracked down the buyer, recovered the machete, and sent it for forensic testing. What they found left no doubt. Traces of blood under the handle matched Yvonne's DNA. The trail that had once seemed cold was suddenly burning hot. On June 27, 2013, FBI agents arrested Brian at his home in California. He was charged with obstructing justice and making false statements in connection with the murder of his girlfriend, Yvonne Baldelli. 2 months later, in August 2013, the family's worst fears were confirmed. On Panama, a local resident discovered skeletal remains in a dense patch of jungle. The discovery came nearly 2 years after Yvonne's disappearance. DNA testing proved what everyone already knew in their hearts. The remains belonged to Yvonne Baldelli. The news shattered her family but also brought a kind of painful peace. Their tireless search, their endless pleas, had led to the truth. Yvonne had finally been found. The discovery reignited the legal case, and after years of investigation, Brian Brimager pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in February 2016. He admitted that he had stabbed Yvonne to death, dismembered her body with a machete, and hidden her remains in the Panamanian jungle. But before justice was complete, the Baldelli family faced another heartbreaking loss. Michelle, Yvonne's devoted sister, had fallen seriously ill. Diagnosed with breast cancer, she grew weaker as the case moved toward trial. Still, she refused to give up. Despite her condition, she recorded a videotape deposition to ensure her voice would be heard in court. That testimony became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case against Brian. Michelle passed away in 2014 before she could see the final verdict. But her courage helped bring justice for her sister. In May 2016, Brian was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. The court described his crime as one of cruelty, control, and deceit, driven by his fear of losing the double life he'd built. As for Yvonne's loyal companion, her dog Georgia May, she was never found. Investigators believe Brian killed her too, knowing that the little spaniel's survival would have exposed his lies. If the dog had been seen wandering alone, everyone would have known that Yvonne never left the island. Even after the truth came out, Brian's wife, Kristen, continued to stand by him. She had married him shortly after Yvonne vanished and was seen visiting him in prison. In a 2017 interview, Kristen's mother defended her daughter's loyalty, saying, "Kristen isn't a fool. She loves Brian." For Yvonne's family, the pain lingered, but they sought solace in giving her the farewell she deserved. After her remains were returned from Panama, they scattered her ashes at sea, her favorite place, the ocean she had always loved. It was a simple, quiet ceremony. Waves, wind, and tears. But it finally gave them what they had fought for. A place to say goodbye. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.